It sounds lovely out here. We've got some really great acoustics. So welcome to worship this Sunday morning. It's good to see you all gathered here. I'll stand so I can see everybody, even through the plant. Welcome to worship. I do have a couple of announcements that I wanted to share with you before we begin a little time of singing. We are still collecting items for the Veep birthday bag kits. So cake mix, frosting, plates, cups, candles, and favors. So we have a box inside the office, or you can donate financially and then we'll collect those items. Right now, Veep is only able to give birthday bags out to about 50% of the clients that come through. So we'll collect through June, we'll put them together in July, and then deliver them to Veep. And that will be a real gift for them. You will see flowers kind of scattered. There are a few on the table. There's some behind Dan as you walked in. Those were all from the memorial service that was held yesterday. And they left them all for us. Please take some of them home with you today because they will just sit here all week and then they'll die. And they're beautiful. So if you are able to take some home, please do so. And you can brighten your homes with some beautiful flowers. Are there any other announcements that I'm not remembering? All right, so we're going to do some singing this morning, and I think we're going to be able to hear each other much better because we're all so much closer together. And as you know, I found this awesome little youth folk hymnal, new since 1971. And let's sing number 63. I'm going to sing. ones next time, maybe, or maybe not. So this morning's scripture reading is from the book of Genesis, chapter 38, 1 through 26. And this summer, at least for the first couple of months, we're going to do the theme of the summer sermon series is women in the scriptures. And this morning, the story is about Tamar. How many are you familiar with Tamar? Not as many. Well, good. So I chose Eugene Peterson's The Message for the translation because it's just a little bit more straightforward. So I invite you to hear Genesis 38, verses 1 through 26. About that time, Judah separated from his brothers and went to stay with a man in Adullam named Hira. While there, Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite named Shua. He married her. They went to bed. She became pregnant and had a son named She got pregnant again, and they had a son named Onan. She had still another son, and this one she named Shelah. They were living at Kezib when she met him. Judah got a wife for his firstborn. Her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, grievously offended God, and God took his life. So Judah told Onan, "Go and sleep with your brother's widow. It is the duty of a brother-in-law to keep your brother's line alive." But Onan knew that the child wouldn't be his, so whenever he slept with his brother's widow, he spilled his semen on the ground so he wouldn't produce a child for his brother. God was much offended by what he did and also took his life. So Judah stepped in and told his daughter-in-law Tamar, "Live as a widow at home with your father until my son Shelah grows up." He was worried that Shelah would also end up dead, just like his brothers. So Tamar went to live with her father. Time passed. Judah's wife Shua's daughter died. When the time of mourning was over, Judah with his friend Hira went to Timnah for the sheep shearing. Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law has gone to Timnah to shear his sheep." So she took off her widow's clothes, put on a veil to disguise herself, and sat at the entrance to Enam, which is on the road to Timnah. She realized by now that even though Shelah had grown up, she wasn't going to be married to him. Judah saw her and assumed that she was a prostitute since she had veiled her face. He left the road and went over to her and said, "Let me sleep with you." He had no idea that she was his daughter-in-law. She said, "What will you pay me?" "I'll send you," he said, "a kid goat from the flock." She said, "Not unless you give me a pledge until you send it." "So what would you want in way of pledge?" he asked. She said, "Your personal seal and cord and the staff that you carry." He handed them over to her and slept with her, and she got pregnant. She then left and went home, and she removed her veil and put her widow's clothes back on. Judah sent the kid goat by his friend to recover the pledge from the woman, but he couldn't find her. He asked the men of that place, "Where's the prostitute that used to sit on the road here?" They said, "There's never been a prostitute here." The friend went back to Judah and said, "I couldn't find her." The men there said, "There has never been a prostitute there." Judah said, "Let her have it then. If we keep looking, everyone will make fun of us. I kept my part of the bargain. I sent the kid goat, but you couldn't find her." 3 months or so, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law has been playing the whore, and now she's pregnant." Judah yelled, "Get her out here and burn her up." As they brought her out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. "I'm pregnant by the man who owns these things. Identify them, please. Who is the owner of the seal and the cord and the staff?" Judah saw that they were his. He said, "She's in the right, and I am in the wrong. I wouldn't let her marry my son Shelah." He never slept with her again. This ends the story of Tamar. Familiar now? It's not really preached all that often on, right? Wow. Talk about all kinds of things being found in the scriptures. So, is this okay? Can you all hear me well enough? No problems? Okay. So the story of Tamar and Judah is found in the midst of the Joseph story in the book of Genesis. So most of us know the Joseph story from the musical, right? Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. It's in Genesis chapter 37 to chapter 50. So it starts in 37 and goes all the way to the end of Genesis. Chapter 37 begins the story by telling of Jacob's 12 sons and how Joseph, one of the youngest and apparently one of the most annoying, ends up getting sold to the Ishmaelites by his brothers. He's then brought to Egypt and sold to Potiphar. But the story of Joseph takes a one-chapter break, chapter 38. So it starts at 37, takes a break at chapter 38, and then resumes at chapter 39 and goes on. The chapter break was the story read this morning, the story of Judah and Tamar. Can anyone think why there would be a break in the story of Joseph? There certainly isn't in the musical, right? They skip this altogether. They don't talk about Judah or Tamar at all. Well, there are several possibilities. One is it slows the action of the story of Joseph down, right? Because you're speeding on through Joseph, and then you have to take a break. So maybe it builds anticipation. What's going to happen to Joseph? Stay tuned, right? Another possibility is that the story of Judah and Tamar anticipate what is yet to come in the Joseph story, a sort of foreshadowing. There's issues around sexuality and deception, the symbolic role of clothing, and unexpected reversals, all which are found in both stories. Another possibility is that it shows the story of Jacob's family alongside of Joseph. In other words, Jacob has 12 sons, right? And each of them have their own stories, most of which are not recorded in the scriptures. We know that Jacob has 12 sons and one daughter. Anybody remember the name? Only one is named. He probably had more. Dinah is the daughter that is named. Can anyone name all 12 sons? Think back to the musical now. Can anyone name any of the 12 sons?
Chad. Levi.
Right? Chad?
Chad.
Gad? Okay, Joseph, right? Judah. Benjamin, right? Naphtali. Simeon. I can see them, in the musical. I can see it in my head so clearly, all coming front, naming themselves. Okay, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and the youngest is Benjamin. Right. So most of Jacob's sons in the scriptures do not really get very good reviews, if they're talked about at all, including Judah, which is the fourth son. Yet ultimately, Judah redeems himself, and when Jacob is on his deathbed, both Judah and Joseph receive a blessing from their father. Last but not least, it is from the line of Judah that someone rather important descends from. Anybody guess from the line of Judah? Well, you're just going to have to wait because I'm going to tell you. So we've talked a little bit about Judah. We know a little bit about him. Who's Tamar? Anybody know anything about Tamar? There's actually two Tamars in the scriptures. The other Tamar is the only daughter of King David that is named. And her story also is a rather tragic story, which is for another time. But we don't know a whole lot, of course, about the Tamar that we're talking about this morning. She is probably a Canaanite, so she's not an Israelite. She's a Canaanite. And she's married to which is spelled E-R, right? It's Judah's firstborn son. And we're told that is wicked and he dies. And then she's married off to Judah's second son, Onan. And Onan does not do the duty that he's supposed to do. He refuses, and so he too dies. So Onan, the second son, is supposed to perform the duty of a brother-in-law. What does that mean?
Does he have to marry her?
He has to marry her. Yep, he has to take her as his wife. It's called Levirate marriage, which is laid out in the book of Deuteronomy, and you can read all about Levirate marriage. But in a nutshell, when a man dies and has no son, the wife of the deceased can't be married outside of that family. The brother of the deceased has to take her in marriage, so Onan has to take her and perform the duty of a husband, and I'll just leave it at that, so that a child might be produced. And the child, if a child is conceived, then shall continue the name of the deceased brother and receive the inheritance, so the name doesn't die. So in essence, Onan is supposed to do his duty, and when Tamar bears a child, it wouldn't be Onan's, it'd be considered Er's child. Consequently, receiving all of that firstborn son's inheritance. But Onan doesn't want a son to receive that. He wants to receive all of that inheritance. So he refuses to do what he's supposed to do, and he dies. So there's only one son left, right? I was thinking of, was it Fred Murray and My Three Sons? Right, I thought of that this week. There's only one son left, Judah's son. And Judah must be thinking, I lost my first son who was married to Tamar. I lost my second son who's married to Tamar. There's no way I'm going to give my third and last son to her. Instead, I'm going to send her off to her father's house to live. And Judah makes up the excuse. He tells her, Shelah is way too young to be married at this point, so go live at your father's house, and when my son is old enough to be married, then I'll bring you back and we'll do what we're supposed to do. Tamar wouldn't have any inheritance rights. She's not free to marry again. She's kind of in limbo, just waiting and waiting. And we suspect that Judah has no plan to give his youngest son to Tamar, but she doesn't know that, at least not yet. Okay, so several years pass, and Tamar finally realizes that Judah is not going to honor the Levirate command. He won't honor his commitment to her, so she decides to take matters into her own hands and assumes the duty of providing an heir for her first husband. She hears that Judah's wife has died, and he and his old friend are going up to the place where Judah's sheep are going to be sheared. So she takes off her widow's clothes, which would identify her as a widow. She puts on different clothing and covers her face with a veil so that she might not be recognized. And she sits on the road and waits for Judah to come by, because she knows this is the road that he'll travel. So as the story goes, Judah sees her, doesn't recognize her, and assumes something rather large. Maybe this was a common thing, right? If you sit by the road with a veil on your face, assumptions are going to be made. Well, he makes that assumption and assumes that she's a prostitute and decides that he wants to lie with her. And she asks, of course, what are you going to pay me? And he promises her a kid goat, and she's like, yep, you're going to promise me a kid goat, but how will I really know that you're going to fulfill that payment? So she asks him for his cord and his signet and his staff, personal items that would be specifically identifiable with him. Driver's license. What else? I'm trying to... A seal, yeah. Something specifically, we know whose this is, right? All personal identifications. And after the deed is done, each go their own way. Tamar's identity is intact, he doesn't know, and Judah's identity is in Tamar's hands. Okay, so Judah goes to fulfill the pledge. So he's honorable that way. He sends a baby goat with his friend to give to her, but she can't be found anywhere. And they ask all the townspeople, no, there's never been a prostitute here. What are you talking about? And Judah says, let's just drop it, because this is going to become really embarrassing. All right, everything's done. It's all in the past. 3 months go by, and Tamar is pregnant. And Judah is outraged. Now, that's a little ironic, don't you think? Perfectly fine for Judah, but not so much for Tamar. He's allowed to have sex with anybody he wants, but she is not. And he assumes the role of judge and says, bring her here, we're going to burn her. We want to get rid of her. But before she's set on the pyre, she sends a message to Judah, and she says, you know, the father of this child that I'm having is the owner of these things. Do you recognize them? Do they look familiar? Right? And he sees them, and it doesn't say his first impression. It would have been kind of fun to see that. But he recognizes them, and he acknowledges that she is in the right and he is in the wrong. He acknowledges that he was never going to let Tamar marry his youngest son anyways. The reading ends there, except it says that little tagline, and he never slept with her again. I bet not, right? Once was enough. But if you continue the last couple of verses in this chapter, there's something that was kind of left out, which is curious. Tamar comes to deliver, and she delivers twins. And she delivers twins in a way that is very reminiscent of Jacob and Esau. Do you remember their birth with the story of Rebekah? Jacob and Esau are born to Rebekah, and Esau was born first, but Jacob came second, holding on to Esau's heel, because Jacob really wanted to be first, almost to pull him back, right? Tamar's twins are named Perez and Zerah. And Perez one-ups Jacob. Zerah emerges first from the womb. So imagine this, emerging from the womb. And the midwife ties a scarlet cord around the wrist so that, because being firstborn was really important, you had to know who was born first. So the midwife ties a thing around Zerah's wrist. He's first. But then Zerah retreats back in the womb, and Perez comes out. So Perez, the secondborn, is considered firstborn. So it's a very much a similar story as to Jacob and Esau. Perez's name means barrier breach, and he edges his way so that he might be firstborn and thus the recipient of all of the inheritance, all the firstborn rights. All right, so why is that important? Anybody know? The Gospel of Matthew begins with a genealogy, and the first part of the genealogy reads like this. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of Jacob, and Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers, and Judah the father of Perez and Zerah by Tamar, and Perez the father of Hezron, and Hezron the father of Aram, and Aram the father of Dinadab, and Aminadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, and Salmon the father of Boaz by Rahab, and Boaz the father of Obed by Ruth, and Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse is the father of King David, right? It's from Perez that King David's line comes. Perhaps the reason that this story of Judah and Tamar included this one chapter story in the midst of the Joseph story, inserted really, is that it is from the line of Perez, the offspring of Judah and Tamar, that comes King David. And then, many generations later, Jesus. Tamar contributes in a direct way to the birth of Jesus of Nazareth and is included in Matthew's genealogy. Oftentimes, she is portrayed as deceptive and a loose woman, right? She is caught in the constraints of a patriarchal society where she has no power. She can't own land. She can't provide for herself. She has no children. She can't marry anyone because she's already been promised to Shelah. Yet in spite of all of this, she is loyal to the family of Judah. She's assertive and rather creative and courageous. She ensured that her first husband had an heir, and from their descendants came King David and then Jesus. After this story, Tamar does not speak again, but she is mentioned again, not only in the genealogy as found in the Gospel of Matthew, but also in the book of Ruth, another story of a courageous and creative woman in the Bible. And at the wedding of Boaz and Ruth, a blessing is given, and the blessing is given to Boaz, and it says, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is entering your home like Rachel and like Leah, the two who built the house of Israel. May you be treated as a worthy man in Ephrath. May you be famous in Bethlehem. May the family the Lord gives you through this young woman be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah." Tamar who stands outside of the community of promise. She's faithful to what God intends for human community. Because remember, she is a Canaanite. She is not an Israelite. And at least in part because of Tamar, Judah receives praise, and his staff becomes a scepter that shall not depart from Judah. So that is the story of Tamar. Really quite an amazing story. Next week, we're going to focus on the story of Miriam. Anybody remember who Miriam is? This is good, right? This is like those Bible stories. I've always heard Miriam. Okay, she has a big story, but Moses' sister is named Miriam, and that is the Miriam. And she celebrates with a song when the Israelites cross the Red Sea and sings the story of Israel's salvation. But her story is much bigger than that even. So, Tamar. I invite you to a moment of silence, and then we will have a time where we can share our joys and our concerns, offerings of gratitude or thanksgiving. So let us just take a breath. So I thought during this time that we might do our joys and concerns a little bit differently, certainly offering up an opportunity to name a joy or concern. But after each one, I invite us all to say, "Holy God, hear our prayer." So we might just do them. And if it's a moment of gratitude or a blessing, anything that you want to lift up so that we might all join in. And I will begin first by mentioning the memorial service was held yesterday for Helen Wing's husband, and their family were there, some traveling from afar. Some of Helen's sisters were there. She sounds like she comes from an extremely large family, but some of her sisters were able to be there. Her oldest sister is 96, and it was, I think it was a good service, and they were glad to be able to honor someone that they knew and loved. And so lift up Helen and her family. Holy God, hear our prayer. Are there any other joys or concerns this day?
joy of Isabella's third birthday yesterday.
Isabella's third birthday. Holy God, hear our prayer.
My great-granddaughter was 1 year old on the 7th
Oh,
this last week.
so I'm going to repeat them back because I'm hooked up to the sound. But Ken's great-granddaughter turned 1 on the 7th. What a joy. Holy God, hear our prayer.
We have a great-granddaughter who turned 2 yesterday.
Clayton and Levon's great-granddaughter turned 2. Oh my gosh, so much young life. Holy God, hear our prayer. Sandy.
I had a surprise visit from Grant yesterday. Who some of you may know because he stayed with me for a while, and he's working at Mayo Clinic now and loving it. And I didn't know he was coming, and he pretended to be the delivery person bringing food. Because Heidi came in first with the children, and she said, "Oh, I ordered food," and in came Grant with the lunch. And it was really a fun surprise. And
So-
I got to see 3 of the great-grandchildren yesterday.
So prayers for joy for Sandy, seeing Grant and Heidi and great-grandchildren. So, Holy God, hear our prayer. Kristen.
John's doing better. He's getting around better now. He had gotten, he had broken his hip. He was riding his bike and got hit from the back by a car. And he's using a walker. He sees the doctor Friday. He's doing a little better, and he's off his pain medication, so we're coming along.
So prayers for Kirsten's John as he heals from broken hip. Holy God, hear our prayer. Are there others? Mavis.
Keon, little baby Keon, graduated from high school last Monday at the convention center, and we were all there and screaming at the top of our lungs, and he said, "I didn't hear you."
So prayers for baby Keon who graduated high school, and we remember him as a baby. So what a wonderful thing. Holy God, hear our prayer. Are there others this day?
I had a nice time with my grandson Grant. Came back from San Jose last week, and on Saturday I think he came back, and we had a big get-together on Sunday at his mother's home, and we were celebrating not only his coming back, but Ellen graduated from her, what is it?
She has a master's in social work.
Yeah.
Okay.
She just got that, and so that was a celebration for both him coming back.
Grant and Ellen.
So
prayers of thanksgiving for Grant and opportunity to be with him now that he lives in California, and Ellen graduating with her master's. Holy God, hear our prayer. It's that time of year, right? All these graduations and life transitions happening. Any other joys or concerns that we'd like to share? One more? Okay.
I am now headed in my 8th month without any shots of chemo or pills. So I have beaten the worst of the blood cancers, the AML.
So prayers of praise and thanksgiving, 8 months, no chemo shots for Ken.
Yeah.
Holy God, hear our prayer. Seeing no others, let us join our voices in praying the prayer that Jesus taught all who would follow him. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, as we forgive those that sin against us. And lead us not in temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. I am really loving that we can all hear each other. The sound is just so much richer when it's in this enclosed space. And who knew that the acoustics in here would be as good as they are? So thank you. We're going to sing one last hymn. It is number 69. It's called Farewell, Good Friends. I actually learned different words to this, but it's Shalom Shevarim. But we'll sing the English. Farewell, good friends. And let's sing it a couple times through. Just be prepared, we're going to do it in a round next time because that's how it's really meant to be. Oh, and I love that. So hear the blessing. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord's face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord look upon you with kindness and grant you peace this day and forevermore. And let all God's people say, Amen. Amen. We have a time of fellowship. Please, if you would like, go on into the fellowship hall, and there's some treats that Jeff brought and some strawberry lemonade that was left over from the memorial service yesterday. So extra treats. So there we go.